Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. I'm your host, Sheila Slick, and today my special guest is Samantha Catone. Sammy is a former litigation attorney whose high-pressure legal career led to burnout and eventually a chronic illness that forced her to stop to rebuild from the inside and out. Welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila. I'm so excited.
Well, that's a very powerful introduction, very short, but very specific. Tell us a little bit about what led you to do what you're doing today.
Absolutely. I mean, coaching and speaking on burnout was never in my ether until very recently. I spent 8 years practicing litigation, as you mentioned, and in early 2025, I had a major health collapse to the point where I was forced to stop and slow down and really start doing some reflecting. The irony of my burnout and my illness was I had been really taking care of myself. I put myself in the top 5% in terms of the way that I ate, organic whole foods and meditation and exercise. I was seeing specialists, I was doing supplementation. So I was confused. I'm like, man, I'm doing all these things right. I've got a great job, I'm making good money, and I am just sick, empty, and miserable. So that set me on this journey where I learned a lot of things. Primarily, I had the traits that I had always kind of attributed to my success, like perfectionism and people pleasing, overachievement, those were survival strategies. And that was one of my first aha moments, that those were learned survival strategies keeping me in fight or flight. So I realized I needed to probably create some new belief systems around productivity and rest and to really retrain my brain to stop equating rest with danger. And that was one of the biggest aha moments that I had. I also had to take a close look at self worth, and finding spirituality was really helpful for that piece. But those were kind of the biggest three shifts for me that started my healing and recovery journey.
Was it 7 years ago that
I got really sick last year, but I've been practicing for 8, so it was a slow build in terms of my health. I always had health issues, and then all of a sudden, my body just gave out on me, where I could barely function. I lost 25 pounds in 2 months, so it was definitely a slow burn, and it finally caught up to me where my body was just like, "You gotta stop ignoring me and start listening, because you detach from yourself, you lose touch with yourself, and I think the body has a way of bringing those things to the surface when you're not paying attention.
so what was the first step in rebuilding yourself back?
I would say the biggest thing was I really had to evaluate my belief systems, which a lot of the time they're operating before our below our conscious awareness, right? So we're not even aware that we have these belief systems. So I started really taking a look at my typical thought patterns. I would have automatic negative thoughts, anxious thoughts all day long. And I'm like, what is the belief driving those thoughts? Things like, if I rest, I'm going to fall behind. And I kept kind of peeling the layers back and realized I was really only praised as a child when I was achieving in some contexts. And that became a survival strategy. So I would create new beliefs. Rest is productive. And I would have to reaffirm those things to myself as often as I could and start to build evidence to really rewire the brain to associate rest and stopping as productive and safe versus a threat.
What has surprised you the most now being on the other side of it? You know how they say hindsight, you can look back. What was your most surprising thing that you learned?
I think for me, the most surprising thing that I learned was I was completely disconnected from myself. And that was odd to me because I was always somebody that thought like I was very in tune with my emotions and my feelings. I was very like a self-aware person. But I realized you're not tapping into your intuition in any way. You are not really listening to what your body is telling you. And I realized you've spent your whole life seeking external validation, seeking answers from other people. Despite feeling like you're this self-aware person, you're chasing answers that have been within yourself, but looking outside of yourself, whether that be through medical specialists or doctors trying to find a diagnosis. I finally realized when you regulate your nervous system, all of the answers that you are seeking are within you, and life becomes so much easier.
All right, let's talk a little bit about regulating the nervous system. What exactly does that mean, Sam?
Yeah, so I mean, we have 2 states. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic state, and this was my aha moment when I started learning about the nervous system because I realized the reason nothing is helping is because I'm in sympathetic, fight or flight, 24/7. So when that happens, what happens is all of our energy goes to survival, right? So any non-essential functions like digestion and rest and detox support, there's no energy left for any of those really important functions. So if you think about it, you're not going to digest food. You're not going to sleep properly. You can't detox. So that's what happened to me. These toxins built up in my body because I was not detoxing, never getting into that parasympathetic state. So it was interesting because all the common advice out there was, set better boundaries and meditate more, eat better. And I'm like, man, I'm doing all these things and none of it's working. So that's where I really realized it's your thought patterns that are keeping you in that sympathetic state. So I focused on my beliefs, which were dictating my thoughts. And once I kinda got a handle on that piece, those other tools became really, really helpful as well, sitting in stillness. My goodness, how many high achieving women can't sit with themselves for 5 to 10 minutes? Our brains are just all over the place, and that is just such an important skill. And the other big piece to that was actually rebuilding self-worth and learning how to not attach my worth to my job title. Because if your worth is attached to your productivity and your output, your nervous system is never gonna feel safe. You're never gonna be in that parasympathetic state because anything you do counter to pursuing those goals feels physically dangerous. So for me, it was really more of the mindset work that I needed to do to regulate my nervous system than anything else in terms of like mindfulness and all of that. It was my thoughts. And that was a big aha moment for me.
That's really, I'm getting a lot out of this conversation, how the mind affects the body.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I ended up healing after starting this work and incorporating the belief work, self-worth, and bringing some spirituality into my life too. I healed without seeing doctors, without taking medicine, without, I stopped everything and said, you need to go inward. Listen to your gut. What is it telling you? And I just needed to rebuild my self-worth so that I had an identity outside of work. That was the biggest thing for me.
So how do you help women today do that same thing?
Yeah, self-worth is the number one, I think, limiting belief, and it really does set the ceiling in our lives for what we can achieve and the fulfillment that we can reach. So what I help women with is one is forgiveness. Forgiveness is really, really intertwined with self-worth, and that's because if we can't forgive other people for things that have happened to us in our lives, we're implicitly telling ourselves that we could do something that is unforgivable. So that is actually implicitly going to really impact your self-worth. Um, like the whole concept of your self-image too. So visualization is something that can be really helpful. If there's an identity that you want to step into or goals that you want to achieve, start visualizing it. Visualize the person that you want to be because our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. So that's a really fun tool. There's so many different things that go into self-worth and finding spirituality can also be really, really helpful. Just believing that you are enough because you exist and it's unattached to anything else.
What services do you offer to help anyone that perhaps feels they're in a position like you were and need some kind of coach or support along?
Yeah, I offer a one-on-one coaching program. I have a couple different structures in place depending on what the client is looking for. I have a 4-week program that's really about going from surviving to thriving. And these three things that I talked about, belief work, self-worth, and spirituality, are really kind of the foundational stuff That's why my approach is a little different, because I'm not going to tell you to worry about your diet or anything else that you're doing until you get those fundamentals down. And I think that's what some of this space is missing a little bit, is once you can address the belief systems and your self-worth, a lot of other things kind of tend to work themselves out, because you're creating a new identity and you start taking better aligned action that is much better for you. So I work with women one-on-one through that process. I also have a longer program for women who are really feeling stuck, like they don't know if they're in the right role or if they're looking for a career path or a career shift. We do a lot of core values work, figuring out what are your core values. Because if you're doing work that's misaligned with those values, burnout's going to be inevitable at some point, right? We need to be aligned with our soul's desires, our values. And I also do a lot of speaking for attorney organizations and law firms. So I'm teaching this stuff via speaking engagements as well, which is cool because I can just reach a lot more people that way. So that's what I'm up to these days.
So, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, Sammy Catone Burnout Coach. I'm probably the most active there. And my website is just sammycatone.com. That you can book a discovery call. You can take a look at my speaking engagements, my one-on-one coaching. There's more details on there. And I'm also on LinkedIn. It's just Samantha Catone on LinkedIn. So that's where you can find me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, you need any support, I am here for you.
And do you only work with women?
My focus is women, but I do not exclude men. I'm primarily focused on attorneys and high achievers. So, high achievers are obviously prone to burnout and stress because we all run with that kind of type A personality, which drives burnout. So, I do not exclude men or anybody from my program. I think this is beneficial for everybody. I just have a real passion for helping women and empower women.
I just wanted to make that clear because we kept mentioning women, women. I thought, well, maybe she works with men as well, not to exclude anyone. And so, for anyone that's hearing your story today, what is the one thing that you want them to walk away with?
Take your power back. I spent most of my life blaming my burnout on my circumstances, my job, toxic work environments. And what I've learned is a lot of this stuff is more internal, and we have a lot more control over this than we think. Use your brain as a tool. You can rewire it. And one thing you can start doing today is implement a daily gratitude practice. There's a lot of neuroscience behind that. So if you leave this conversation with nothing else, start a daily gratitude practice, and things are going to shift for you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Samantha.
Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate you. Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. Until next time.